Florence, 1308. The crypt beneath Santa Croce didn't just reek, it exhaled the breath of centuries. A heavy mix, damp parchment, cold iron, the lingering metallic tang of ancient forgotten blood. Here, Tommaso di Rinaldi knelt. He was a scholar of sacred texts, his fingers trembling over a codex bound in blackened leather. For decades, Tommaso hadn't sought just knowledge. He sought absolution through texts, meticulously cataloging the divine order. Perhaps it was a silent plea for his unspoken transgressions, the subtle pride, the intellectual dishonesties, the cold distances he'd kept from a world too messy for his pristine theories. This codex, discovered secreted within a forgotten ossuary, felt warm to the touch, almost pulsing with a life that wasn't its own. Its surface was etched with faint, shimmering veins like molten obsidian. Then, 9 strikes of a distant bell echoed through the stone. No clock in Florence marked such a late hour. Each chime resonated with a dread that vibrated in Tommaso's bones, a visceral premonition of unraveling the truth. His breath hitched. The serpent motif on the clasp, intricate and menacing, an Ouroboros, devouring its tail, coiled tighter as he opened the book. Its eyes, dull moments before, now glowed with a faint internal luminescence, mirroring the sudden cold dread in Tommaso's own. The crypt's air thickened, growing colder, heavy with a silent accusation that seemed to emanate not from the stones, but from the very core of his being. He knew, with a certainty that defied every theological doctrine he had ever meticulously transcribed, that this book was an intrusion, a violation not just of history, but of the very divine order he sought to comprehend. It was older than the nascent whispers of a coming Inferno, older than the man, Alighieri, who would one day claim its dark authorship, shaping its echoes into verse. Yet here it was, waiting for him. Tommaso opened the book. Its pages were not merely inscribed, they were etched with a dizzying map of descending circles, a terrifying geography of damnation. Each ring teemed with names he recognized from Florence's shadowed history, the scheming merchants, the corrupted clerics, the vengeful patricians, and then, impossibly, horrifyingly, his own. A chill that was less cold and more profound. Ontological knowledge crawled up his spine as the ink seemed to writhe, reshaping itself, not into a question, but a condemnation that ripped through his carefully constructed intellectual defenses.
What sin did you forget to atone for? The gates of hell are locked from within.
Awe and pure terror collided within him. He had spent decades studying theology, meticulously mapping the path to salvation, theorizing atonement. But this was no mere allegory. This was the source, the original sin, a raw, living testament to the soul's complicity in its own fall. It knew him. It had waited for him. His breath quickened, rattling in the sudden, absolute silence. The crypt grew colder, the shadows stretching, not just from the walls, but from within himself, manifesting the creeping despair of a condemned soul, as Tommaso whispered the title aloud. The Locked Room of Divine Justice. The crypt's massive, iron-bound doors slammed shut with a thunderous boom that echoed through the very bedrock of Florence, sealing him within a self-made purgatory. The brass key, which moments before had felt weighty in his palm, dissolved into the air like smoke, a cruel illusion revealing his true entrapment. Outside, he imagined the midnight rain lashing the cobblestones of Florence, a city choking on its own ambition, its citizens oblivious to the infernal cartography being unveiled beneath its very foundations. A map drawn not by divine decree, but by human choosing. On the book's cover, the serpent uncoiled further, its tail flicking toward the open pages, a predator recognizing its prey. The ink on the first page writhed again, now a stark, chilling pronouncement that transcended mere text, becoming a direct address to his soul. The sins of the living are the sins of the dead. Which are yours? And who is the true architect of agony? The question hung in the air, a burning indictment. Then, in a final, horrifying twist, Tommaso's own shadow detached from the wall, twisting, stretching, coalescing into the shape of a figure he did not recognize, his own face, but older, hollow-eyed, a grotesque caricature of his scholarly self, grinning with an ancient complicit knowledge that echoed the book's own malevolent wisdom. It was the shadow of his potential damnation, a reflection of the architect within. The grinned shadow lingered, a phantom accomplice to the terror seizing Tommaso's throat. Its mocking smile echoed his own intellectual pride. But Tommaso's gaze was already fixed on the codex. The pages, alive with their sinister glow, seemed to inhale the crypt's stagnant air, drawing sustenance from his dread. This was no ordinary manuscript. It was the very city of knives distilled to ink and vellum, a breach not merely in history, but in the fabric of temporal causality itself. As his gaze swept across the terrifying geography of damnation, the marginalia, faint moments before, sharpened into impossible clarity. This was a Rosetta Stone of cosmic secrets. Annotations appeared in Hebrew, Sumerian, and a language whose ciphers twisted his mind, coiling around his sanity. He instinctively recognized it as lingua inferni, the very speech of the damned. A language of pure suffering, devoid of solace. Each line whispered of impossible origins. Transcribed in the 12th century by the custodes abyssi, guardians of forbidden cosmologies, those who dwell where time unravels, one note declared. Yet, another note, scrawled in an agonizing hand, violently contradicted it. Predates even Dante, surfacing in the libraries of Charlemagne's court before vanishing during the First Crusade, carried on the breath of forgotten prayers. The custodes, it seemed, were not just historians. Perhaps they were chrononauts of the soul, condemned to chart the echoes of future damnation. Tommaso's scholar's mind reeled. His theological anchors dissolved like mist. This book, The Locked Room of Divine Justice, was not merely old. It was anachronistic, a paradox made flesh. The crypt walls, cold stone just moments ago, now seemed to hum with a faint, impossible vibration. The tick-tick-ticking of an unlit water clock measuring God's silence. This sound didn't exist in 1308, yet it resonated with the inexorable march of self-inflicted judgment. A scent of ozone and blood, metallic and sharp, permeated the air, replacing the familiar reek of tallow. It was the sizzle hiss of copper brazier coals, mirroring the river Phlegethon's boiling blood. Was the book alive, an entity unto itself? Or was the crypt itself wrong? A localized tear in reality, a space where temporal laws frayed. A prison of the mind, the custodes abyssi called hell in their journals, a phrase now burning through Tommaso's thoughts. Yet this book defied their purpose. It was not a prison. It was the key to an unlocked, terrifying reality, a revelation of the continuity of damnation. He found a passage describing punishments for sins that would not emerge for another century. Heresies yet unuttered, crimes yet uncommitted, written with chilling precision. This book was prophetic. He saw a stark depiction of heretics, screaming at sealed lids, and a chilling thought solidified, striking him with the force of revelation. Twitter echo chambers, digital tombs where self-imposed certitude sealed out dissenting light. Then, hoarders rolling boulders of useless coin, their faces contorted by insatiable greed. Crypto bros, eternally chasing phantom gains. Traders signing climate death warrants, the digital ink of their greed becoming a burning brand. Modern CEOs whose abstract decisions reaped concrete infernos. This book wasn't just old. It was a medieval indictment of 21st century souls, a blueprint of damnation woven into the very fabric of time, transcending epochs. How could its author foresee them? He flipped a page. A footnote, seemingly written in a different hand, shimmered into existence like heat haze over a desert. This text was found in the ruins of a library that burned in 1547. The books inside were dated 1308. The fire was never investigated. Tommaso's breath caught. 1547. But this book had vanished from recorded history in 1320, and here it bore the immutable mark of 1308, just as he had found it. The timelines fractured, shattered by the book's very existence, just as Dante's Florence, a city of gold and vomit, was fracturing under the weight of its own ambition and internal strife. The author, the true architect of this agony, remained unnamed. Their very presence was a void that resonated with profound self-erasure. Undone, erased from history by a force beyond human understanding, a cosmic retraction, the marginalia hinted. Or, chillingly, still alive, trapped in the locked room of their own creation, eternally rewriting the damnation they fled. Tommaso's gaze fell to a faded symbol at the bottom of a page, a subtle glyph of intertwined mirrors. A phantom title resonated in his mind: The Codex of the Ninth Circle, a rumored sequel, a text describing Hell's core not as a realm of ice, but as a mirror reflecting the soul's truest, most distorted self. And for a horrific moment, as the crypt air grew heavy, thick with the unwritten future, Tommaso knew with sickening clarity: this was not just a book. This was an infection, a self-propagating knowledge that transmuted reality. This was the true descent protocol, a cosmic key. And he, Tommaso di Rinaldi, scholar of Florence, had just opened the patient zero. He was already scribbling furiously, like a medieval monk facing a manifest specter, already cursed to map a hell of his own making, its boundaries expanding with every revelation. Despite the shadow's lingering grin, a silent reminder of his complicity, Tommaso's attention was drawn back to the codex. Its pages now shimmered with an unnatural light. Each line pulsed with malignant understanding. This book's cosmology wasn't a map. It was a mirror, endlessly reflecting the user's soul. It divided the soul's fall into 9 concentric circles. Each layer represented a refinement of moral corruption, a tightening spiral of self-inflicted agony. But the true horror lay in how each circle reflected him, illuminating the subtle contours of his own unacknowledged sins. Hell isn't fire and demons. It's a self-assembling prison, constructed atom by atom from the very choices one makes. Dante's 9 circles tighten like a cosmic noose, each torment designed by the sins themselves, their essence becoming their eternal punishment. This is Contrapasso. Tommaso's eyes traced the initial rings. Limbo. Here, the virtuous non-Christians were preserved in eternal stillness, their faces etched with a yearning that never resolves. Not fire, but frozen longing, an existential ache for a truth just beyond reach, a mirror of unfulfilled potential. Tommaso felt a phantom chill, a distant ache of choices not made in his own life. The quiet friendships he'd neglected for dusty manuscripts, the authentic connections he'd sacrificed for intellectual purity. His own scholastic solitude, he realized, was a form of limbo. Next, the lustful, whirled in endless storms, bodies fused together, stripped of agency. They were forever drawn to an elusive, insubstantial object of desire. This wind isn't natural. It's the breath of God, blowing away those who surrendered fleeting desire over sovereign will, consuming their identity in the whirlwind of their own passions. They are never still, never free, eternally enslaved by their own unbridled appetite. Tommaso felt a flush of shame, remembering fleeting, unchaste desires that had once briefly unsettled his monastic dedication. Desires he'd suppressed but never truly atoned for, still present as a latent energy. His fingers grazed the 3rd circle, and the crypt's stagnant air seemed to thicken with the scent of phantom feasts, a pervasive aroma of unfulfilled hunger. Gluttony, a rainless desert where excess became desiccation. Sinners here chase phantom feasts, their mouths watering for food that never arrives, bodies wasting away as they devour nothing. Tommaso saw not just medieval drunkards, but faces illuminated by flickering screens, TikTok mukbangers gorging on attention in digital swamps, their endless consumption feeding only an endless void. This, he realized, was the punishment of capitalism: endless toil for no return, an insatiable hunger for the immaterial. The desert mirrored modernity, where consumption is a religion and hunger is eternal, a profound societal gluttony. He recognized his own gluttony for knowledge, for intellectual dominance, consuming texts without truly digesting their wisdom, merely collecting information, bloated but empty. Remember, the gates are locked from the inside. Every lie you polish, every betrayal you rationalize, every truth you deflect, it forges another bar in your cage. This is Contrapasso, a punishment that mirrors the sin's essence, reflecting it back until the soul is utterly defined by its own corruption. Tommaso's own reflection flickered in the swirling ink. Fraud. A lake of boiling gum where liars were trapped in eternal confession. They were unable to speak truth, yet forced to witness their own deceptions. He saw modern faces, influencers marching in lead-lined cloaks, smiles stitched shut while unseen demons, the unseen consequences of their own deceit, prodded them with hooks. The gum hardened around their tongues, binding them to the lies they could not escape. The falsehoods they presented to the world became their physical reality. This was the punishment of the manipulator, who built their life on deception and now found no one believed them, not even themselves, trapped in a self-spun web. Tommaso felt the phantom weight of a lead cloak, remembering scholarly debates where he had subtly twisted logic, presented incomplete evidence, or claimed another's insight as his own, polishing his own intellectual fraud. And Satan? He's no rebel king, no triumphant dark lord. He's a weeping machine, a monument to ultimate despair. 3 faces, red, yellow, black, gnaw eternally on history's arch-traitors in eternal ice. His frozen tears build the walls of the 9th circle, each drop a solidified betrayal. His beating wings churn the blizzard, perpetuating the very torment that defines him. The horror isn't punishment meted out from above. It's the realization that damned souls, through their sustained choices, maintain their own hell, becoming its very architecture. The crypt air grew heavy, thick with the unwritten future, infused with the bitter taste of truth. Tommaso, a scholar of Florence, was now a conduit, his mind a canvas for a terrifying truth that transcended texts. He understood, with sickening clarity, why the book was hidden, why it was prophetic. Heresy, flaming tombs for those who reject divine truth. He saw algorithm-trapped conspiracists shouting at sealed screens, their self-chosen beliefs dissolving in the cold fire of self-imposed isolation, trapped by their own dogma. Tommaso had always prided himself on intellectual openness, but he felt the insidious pull of his own intellectual arrogance, his quiet dismissal of simpler faiths as a subtle heresy. If God is love, why no second chance? The question hung in the air, a whisper from the depths. The book's chilling reply resonated through him. Mercy waits outside the gates you welded shut. Tommaso felt a primal shift, a deep-seated recognition. For initiates, the book's truth settled in his bones, not as external damnation, but as an internal, self-inflicted crystallization. Lucifer's wings must beat, or hell thaws, implying that even damnation served a grim cosmic design, a balance maintained by existential despair. He looked at his own trembling hands, fingers still, stained with the codex's ancient dust. The 3 beasts that stalked Dante's cell, the leopard, the lion, the she-wolf, never left the human soul. He felt the leopard of fraud staining his own curated social masks, the polite smiles masking intellectual competition, the lion of violence hidden in his silent cruelties, the sharp judgments, the dismissals of those he deemed lesser, the she-wolf of avarice clawing at his midnight thoughts, at the very ambition that had led him to this crypt, a hunger for recognition, for ultimate knowledge that bordered on insatiable greed. Where did he feel their breath? Everywhere. This isn't about damnation as an external judgment. It's about awakening mid-fall. Every circle exists in your choices right now, a latent possibility. The gluttony of endless scrolling, the fraud of filtered lives, the violence of casual cruelty. You've already visited. The exit begins when you stop polishing the lock, when you cease rationalizing the self-deception that keeps you trapped. As the words faded, Tommaso's shadow detached again, twisting, reforming. But this time, it showed him in the 9th circle of ice, encased up to his neck, frozen in betrayal. The betrayal of self, of truth, of connection. His eyes were open, but he could not see beyond his own reflection. Yet the ice was not solid. It was made of mirrors, each reflecting a different version of himself, a shattered soul in a self-made prison, constructed from his own unacknowledged sins, the ultimate solitude. Florence, 1315. Smoke curled from a pyre in the Piazza della Signoria. Its acrid scent mingled with the lingering dread in Tommaso's mind. Pages from Dante's Commedia, specifically the Inferno chapter, blackened and twisted in the flames, reduced to ash by clerical decree. The Vatican's decree echoed off the stone walls, sharper than any bell. Theological arson. How dared a disgraced exile, a mere layman, a Florentine poet, dethrone popes in boiling pitch? How dared he drag St. Peter's heirs into Malebolge's filth, assigning them torments more vivid than any sermon? The 14th century theologian Bartolomeo da Bologna, pale and sweating beneath his cowl, dismissed it as a poet's fever dream, fueled by political spite. Yet, the Church condemned the text not merely for its graphic depictions of divine wrath, but particularly for the ninth circle's icy torments. These seem to contradict Christ's boundless mercy and theological orthodoxy, casting God as a cosmic torturer. Yet the heresy cut deeper, infecting the very concept of originality. It challenged the divine inspiration of all revelation. Muslim scholars in Córdoba, centuries before Dante, unrolled scrolls of Muhammad's Miraj, his miraculous night journey and ascent through 7 heavens and hells. This was 6 centuries before Dante ever put quill to parchment. The parallels coiled, like serpents in the crypt's chilling air, mirroring the one on Tommaso's codex. Both poets were guided by celestial spirits, Gabriel for Muhammad and Virgil for Dante. Both descended through meticulously layered torments. Both witnessed justice unfold. Was this divine revelation filtered through cultural archetypes, or was it Venetian port plagiarism? Ideas migrating on the trade winds of scholarship and war. Linguists noted anachronisms in the Inferno's Latin, sophisticated grammatical structures suggesting a later, more learned authorship, perhaps an interpolation. Some posited that Dante himself, perhaps having glimpsed fragments of this very lost manuscript, the one now in Tommaso's trembling hands, used them to craft his Inferno. He transformed terrifying revelations into a palatable, albeit brutal, allegory for his age. This makes Tommaso's book a phantom precursor, a haunting blueprint, its true authorship deliberately obscured. Others argued the book was a collaborative hallucination, a shared myth that emerged from the collective fears of medieval Europe, given form by multiple hands, a cosmic psychic download. The ticking of a non-existent clock filled the air, a constant reminder of temporal dissonance. Shadows coiled like serpents near the book's open pages, seeming to whisper the question, who truly authored damnation? Dante damned Florence's corruption with righteous fury, yet his own hands bore blood, metaphorically and literally. As a prior, he signed death warrants for political rivals, sending men to exile or worse. As a soldier, he watched men drown in the Arno's muddy waters during battles. His complicity in violence was undeniable. This was the hypocrite's paradox. He exiled himself from the moral truth of his actions long before Florence banished him geographically. He preached the self-assembling prison of sin, yet stood outside his own bars, judging others while his own ledger remained secret. The book he supposedly authored, or perhaps copied, described punishments for future sins, heresies that would not emerge for another century, crimes like the systemic greed of corporate titans. How could its author foresee them? Unless the book itself was a direct conduit to the timeless architecture of moral decay, and the women. The Inferno's women are a bitter pill to swallow. Francesca da Rimini, seduced by a forbidden book, whirled eternally in lust's storm, her voice raw with tragic poetry, given agency even in damnation. Cleopatra drowned in gluttony's swamp, a queen reduced to gulping filth, brought low by her earthly appetites. But Beatrice, Dante's salvation? A mute icon floating in paradise, a passive symbol of grace. The contradiction bled. Why give damned women such fierce humanity, such poignant suffering, while silencing the saved, rendering them voiceless ideals? The mirror, it seemed, had its own biases, reflecting the author's own suppressed anxieties and unexamined misogynies. Modern scholars sharpened the knife of critique. Teodolinda Berolini scoffed, sadistic moral algebra. How could a loving God design such inventive, agonizing cruelty? How could boiling a corrupt pope in pitch differ fundamentally from the sin itself, transforming divine justice into divine vengeance? The very essence of Contrapasso became a cruel jest, mocking both victim and deity. Here lay the negative space, the hollow at the heart of the Inferno. Dante never named his own sin. He painted popes in excrement and flattered in fraud's pitch. Yet his secret guilt, his deep moral wound, remained unconfessed, hidden behind his righteous judgments. This is the ultimate recursion of locked from the inside. The judge stands outside his own hell, oblivious or unwilling to enter. One theory posits the book was simply too accurate. Its descriptions of hell's geography matched 20th century psychological models of guilt, of projection, of the subconscious mind creating its torment. But this mystery remains unspoken, left to fester in the gaps between lines, a haunting silence. The poor book survives because it terrifies all sides for different reasons. The church burned it, then canonized its cosmology, integrating its fear into their doctrine. Academics decry its brutality, yet teach its circles as truth, as a timeless literary and psychological framework. You recoil at its vision, because you recognize the architecture of your own compromises, your own complicities. For sleepers, this is a vivid depiction of moral consequences, a stark warning. The circles serve as a literal map of suffering. Sin leads to suffering, and redemption is possible only through repentance. For initiates, the circles map to profound psychological states, lust as loss of will, fraud as societal decay and self-deception, violence as self-mutilation. The book's true message may not be punishment, but agency, the terrifying freedom of self-damnation. The trembling hand is not weakness, but the soul's first, terrifying step toward conscious choice, the acknowledgement of complicity. Dante's damnation is a mirror, endlessly reflecting back. When you ask, could a sinner write divine justice? You're really asking, could I? The question itself is the first step into the labyrinth, lore infection, foreshadowing, a footnote shimmering with a faint internal light in a 19th century manuscript hints at a sequel, the Codex of the Ninth Circle, a text that describes the core of hell as a mirror reflecting the soul's truest, most distorted self. But no copy has ever been found, only whispers carried on the wind. Descend now into the abyss moment, the vision that cracks sanity. This is Satan's frozen prison, not a throne of dominion, but a machine of infinite, self-perpetuating despair. His three faces, red, yellow, and black, represent the ultimate perversions of power, intellect, and grace. They gnaw eternally on history's arch-traitors. Judas, the ultimate betrayal of spiritual authority. Brutus, the betrayal of civil loyalty. And Cassius, the betrayal of friendship. His bat wings, vast and leathery, beat a ceaseless blizzard that freezes the ninth circle solid. Each gust is a breath of ultimate despair. His tears, frozen in perpetual grief, are the very mortar binding, the ice, constructing the walls of ultimate isolation. Here lies the terrible recursion. Traitors, through their actions, become the ice that traps future traitors. A self-sustaining cycle of replicated torment. Remember the three beasts stalking Dante's cell in Canto 1? They were never mere animals. They are archetypes wearing your skin, reflections of your fundamental human flaws, haunting your every unexamined choice. The leopard of fraud, its spotted pelt, a camouflage of shifting truths, is your Instagram filter. Your LinkedIn persona. The beautiful lie polished daily, the curated self presented to the world, masking insecurity and deceit. Its spots are the tiny, compounding deceptions that make up a fabricated identity. You wear it, unknowingly, every time you present a fragmented, dishonest version of yourself. The lion of violence. Its roar lives not just in overt aggression, but in texts you never sent. The deliberate silences you weaponized, the casual cruelties, folded into bureaucratic forms, and the systemic injustices you passively uphold. Its ferocity is the raw, unacknowledged power you exert, often unintentionally, over others. The violence of apathy or inaction. You feel its breath whenever you witness injustice and choose silence. The she-wolf of avarice. Its ribs press against your screen as you scroll. Buy this, hoard that. This emptiness might finally fit. This acquisition might finally fill the void. Its insatiable hunger is the gnawing dissatisfaction that drives endless consumption, the spiritual emptiness behind the material pursuit, the craving for more that can never be sated. You hear its whine in your midnight thoughts of unfulfilled desires. Contrapasso bleeds into your reality, making the abstract torments viscerally, concrete. In Circle 8, the fraudulent march in lead-lined cloaks, symbols of their unbearable hypocrisy, their smiles stitched shut, unable to express truth. Demons hook their flesh, tearing new wounds as they shuffle, extensions of their internal torment. Sound familiar? The hook lives in your phone, the dopamine lash pulling you through another reel, another feed, another hour lost to the insatiable, formless male bulge of algorithms. You chose the cloak of curated identity. You feel the hook of digital addiction, of endless, empty consumption. Recall Virgil's ancient warning from the Aeneid. The descent is easy, for the gate of hell stands open day and night. But Dante twists it in Canto 1, offering a terrifying counterpoint. The exit, only through Satan's tears. The ice melts, and the prison dissolves when you see yourself in the machine. When you recognize the familiar contours of your sin in the faces of the damned. When the tax fraud sweating beside you in the pitch of Malebranche is your own reflection. Distorted, but undeniable. When the influencer's stitched smile mirrors your own, finally revealing the uncomfortable truth behind the performance. The Inferno's true horror isn't external punishment. It's ultimate participation. You maintain the prison through your choices. You sharpen the hooks with your complicity. You freeze the tears into new walls with every unacknowledged betrayal, every lie. The gate was never locked by God. You welded it shut and called it freedom, called it choice, called it life. Francesca, damned in lust's storm, her voice raw, with eternal lament, whispers the curse that binds us all, the very essence of human misery. There is no greater pain than to remember, in our misery, the time we were happy. You know that ache, the memory of unfiltered sunlight on your face, of genuine laughter that didn't need an audience, of unhurried silence, the quiet communion with self, of a self not curated for consumption, not performed for approval. That is the first tear, the first drop of shared cosmic sorrow that begins to melt the ice of self-imposed damnation. That is the first crack in the prison. If Dante's vision, and this ancient codex, holds true, then 4 fundamental pillars of your reality, and the very notion of human experience, collapse. They reveal a stark, terrifying metaphysics. First, hell is democratic. No earthly wealth, social status, or performative piety buys escape. The avaricious pope boils alongside the petty thief, their distinctions irrelevant before the crystalline justice of Contrapasso. Your common excuses, I'm not evil, just practical. Everyone does it. It's just business. They dissolve in the pitch. They reveal the universal commonality of human failure. This shatters any illusions of privileged salvation. Second, time is liquid. The sin you commit today isn't merely archived as a past mistake. It is an active, ongoing force that constructs your eternal body, solidifying your spiritual form. The gossiper's tongue literally becomes a writhing worm, twisting in perpetual deceit. The hypocrite's skin hardens to lead, a physical manifestation of their spiritual weight. You are sculpting your damnation in real time, brick by painful brick. You are becoming the sum of your unexamined choices. This is not a future punishment, but a present becoming. Third, God's mercy is irrelevant. Justice isn't dispensed from an external benevolent hand. It crystallizes from within. Like water freezing around a falling leaf, your choices solidify, the architecture of your soul, creating the conditions of your torment. The gate remains open until you seal it with habitual betrayal, with consistent self-deception, with the refusal to acknowledge complicity. Mercy, then, is not a gift bestowed, but a state achieved through radical honesty. Fourth, you're already there. This is not a metaphor. This is metaphysics. That rush of schadenfreude when a rival fails, You stand already in the Styx, clawing at other souls, poisoning the waters of connection. The 3 a.m. scroll through luxury feeds, endlessly desiring, endlessly unfulfilled. You roll Sisyphus's boulder through Circle 4, the burden of insatiable avarice. The Inferno isn't a destination, it's a state of being, a continuous internal unfolding of moral consequence. If this book is true, then every sin is not just a moral transgression, but a geometric shape. Its consequences measurable, inevitable, and self-inflicted. But what of forgiveness? Is it a divine loophole? A Mecca? Florence, 1321. Dante died exiled, still tasting hell's ice, its chill perhaps a permanent phantom in his memory. But his Inferno lives, not as a static threat, not as a historical artifact. It lives as a living, breathing awakening. You thought this was about external fire, about divine retribution descending from above. It was always about seeing the lock in your hands, the chains of your own making, the self-imposed prison. The book remains a riddle, a paradox bound in obsidian and dread. Its truths are not simple answers, but relentless provocations. They demand self-interrogation. Whether a divine map, a psychological parable, or a timeless infection of consciousness, it forces us to ask, what circle do we inhabit? What is the architecture of our complicity? The crypt's door remains sealed, a final, heavy slab of stone, yet its barrier is now psychological, not physical. Tommaso's shadow detaches one final time, now showing him not encased in ice, but standing before the book's cover, a figure of profound contemplation. The serpent's eyes glow brighter, its tail flicking toward the title, which now resonates with a terrifying choice. The locked room of divine justice, or human choice. Remember the whisper that echoes from its pages, a truth that transcends time and dogma. The locked room was never a prison, it was a threshold, the boundary between awareness and continued slumber. If Satan weeps, whose tears freeze your cage? Are they his? Or are they the unacknowledged tears of your despair, the sorrow of a lost, unchosen self? But if the book was never meant to be, read by human eyes, if its true purpose was not dissemination, then who, in the profound silence of eternity, was it truly written for? A whisper, faint and chilling, drifts in the air, a final fragment of lingua inferni, the language of absolute despair. Non omnis qui nititur ad ethera pervenit. Not all who strive for heaven arrive there. A sobering truth. Now, the choice is yours. The book has been opened. The truth has been revealed. The mirror reflects for sleepers. Comment on one circle you visited this week, in the mundane or the profound. Was it gluttony's endless scroll? Fraud's carefully filtered life? A flicker of avarice in a passing desire? Acknowledge it. For initiates, tap thawing if you feel the ice crack. If the unbearable nostalgia for your truest self has begun to break through. The gate was never locked. You were just clutching the key, mistaking its weight for freedom.